Sonny, a frail young man with pale skin and dark circles under his eyes, was seated on a rusty bench in front of the police station. He cradled a cup of plant-based coffee, a luxury item that was usually reserved for higher-class citizens. The drink, which had cost him most of his savings, was a rare indulgence. Sonny had decided to pamper himself on that particular day. As he knew his life was rapidly coming to an end, as he enjoyed the warmth of the coffee, he raised the cup to his lips, savoring its aroma. He hesitated, then took a small sip, only to grimace at the bitterness. "Ah, so bitter," he muttered, staring at the cup in disdain. Still, determined to get his money's worth, he forced himself to drink more. "I should have bought a piece of real meat instead. Who knew actual coffee would taste like this? Well, at least it'll keep me awake," he thought, staring off into the distance. Soon, the weariness overtook him. He slapped his face to shake off the drowsiness. "TSK, what a rip-off," he muttered, finishing the cup and tossing it into a nearby trash bin. The cup missed and fell to the ground. With an exasperated roll of his eyes, he walked over, picked it up, and placed it carefully in the trash. As he crossed the street toward the police station, he couldn't help but notice how the wealthy citizens rushed by, seemingly oblivious to his presence. His thin, haggard appearance and lack of sleep made him stick out in stark contrast to the tall, well-dressed individuals. He couldn't help but envy them as he walked past, thinking to himself, "I guess that's what 3 full meals a day would do for you." Inside the police station, a tired-looking officer gave him a quick, uninterested glance before frowning in disdain. "Are you lost, boy?" the officer asked. Sonny glanced around the room, taking in the heavily fortified walls and the turret nests in the ceiling. The officer, looking scruffy and worn, seemed to mirror the atmosphere of the station. "Hey, I'm talking to you," the officer snapped, irritated. Sonny cleared his throat, his attention returning to the officer. No," he replied with a nervous shift. He scratched his head and added, "As per the 3rd special directive, I am here to surrender myself as a carrier of the nightmare spell." The officer's expression shifted instantly from annoyance to caution as he studied Sonny with intense scrutiny. "Are you sure you're infected? When did you start showing symptoms?" Sonny shrugged nonchalantly. "A week ago." The officer's face turned pale at the mention of the time frame. "Shit," he muttered, pressing a button on his terminal and shouting, "Attention! Code Black in the lobby. I repeat, Code Black." The nightmare spell had emerged decades ago, following a period of intense natural disasters and wars. At first, it appeared to be just another illness, with people reporting extreme fatigue and drowsiness. But when people began falling into an unnatural slumber, with no sign of waking up for days, panic ensued. Governments were unprepared, and by the time they responded, it was too late. The infected died, their bodies transforming into monstrous creatures that overwhelmed militaries worldwide. The nightmare only worsened as the dead turned into nightmare creatures, causing chaos. It wasn't until the awakened, survivors who gained powerful abilities from the spell, fought back that peace was restored. However, the dangers of the nightmare spell continued to loom over the world, and now, it was Sonny's turn to face it. For someone like Sonny, with no family and no training, being chosen by the spell was nothing short of a death sentence. Unlike the privileged children from wealthy families who were trained from a young age, he had spent most of his life just trying to survive. A few minutes later, Sonny found himself seated in restraints, fastened into a strange chair that resembled a cross between a hospital bed and a torture device. The room was dimly lit, with thick armored walls and a massive vault door. Several officers stood nearby, rifles in hand, their grim faces betraying the seriousness of the situation. Sonny, however, was only focused on one thing: sleep. His eyelids drooped as he fought to stay awake. Soon, a gray-haired policeman entered the room, his face weathered with experience. He checked the restraints and glanced at his wristwatch before turning to Sunny. "What's your name, kid?" Sunny blinked, trying to concentrate through his overwhelming fatigue. "Sunless," he muttered. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Sunless? That's a strange name." Sunny shifted in his seat, unable to shrug. What's strange about it? Not everyone in the outskirts even gets a name, he said with a weak smile. "I was born during a solar eclipse. My mom had a poetic soul." The old policeman gave a non-committal grunt. "Do you want me to contact your family?" Sunny shook his head. "No one to contact. Don't bother." For a brief moment, the officer's face darkened before his expression turned serious. "All right, Sunless. How long can you stay awake?" Not long," Sunny replied, his voice barely audible. The officer sighed. "Then we don't have time for the full procedure. Try to stay awake and listen carefully. How much do you know about the nightmare spell?" Sunny gave him a questioning look. "As much as anyone else, I guess. Who doesn't know about it?" The officer leaned forward, his tone becoming more intense. "Not the stuff you see in dramas. Not the propaganda broadcasts. How much do you really know? Isn't it just going into the dream realm, killing monsters, getting magic powers, and becoming an awakened?" Sunny asked, confused. The officer shook his head. "Once you fall asleep, you'll enter your first nightmare. It's a trial created by the spell. There will be monsters, sure, but there will also be people. Remember, they're not real. They're illusions to test you." "How do you know that?" Sunny asked skeptically. The officer stared at him. "You might have to kill them, kid. So just think of them as illusions. It'll make things easier for you." Sunny nodded absent-mindedly. The officer continued, explaining how luck would play a large role in the nightmare, how some aspects would make things easier, and how others would make it more difficult. If you survive, you'll become halfway to being an awakened. If you die, well, the nightmare creatures will come into the real world. With that, the officer's voice began to fade as Sunny's eyelids grew heavier. "Try not to die right away," he added, his words growing softer. In the darkness, a voice echoed. "Aspirant, welcome to the nightmare spell. Prepare for your first trial." And just like that, Sunny drifted into a deep sleep, his body succumbing to the inevitable.